Have you ever felt like something is deeply wrong? Not just in the news, not just in politics, not just in the economy, but inside you. Like the whole world is breathing wrong, like each morning feels heavier than the one before. And you look around and realize you're not alone in this feeling. There's a collapse happening, but it's not just external. It's inside each one of us. And maybe, just maybe, the world out there is shattered because we're shattered on the inside first. Carl Jung knew this. He saw the chaos of the 20th century, the wars, the violence, the collective madness, and he said, "This didn't start in the streets. It started in the soul." And if you're feeling this weight, this inexplicable anguish, this silent call that wakes you up at dawn, maybe it's because your consciousness is beginning to perceive something that most people still don't want to see. I know it's hard to hear this. You wake up, you work, you try to live your life, and suddenly you catch yourself thinking, how long will this continue? How long will we keep pretending everything's okay? It's completely valid to feel this. Because what you're feeling isn't despair, it's lucidity. And lucidity, at first, hurts. It tears the veil of illusions and shows you what's always been there, but what you didn't want to see. And what's there is simple. This world, the way it's built, can't last forever. I'm not saying this to make you anxious, but to wake you up. Because you need to understand something fundamental before we continue. The collapse you feel isn't the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of something humanity needs to go through to be reborn. Think with me. Every crisis you see around you, every division, every hatred, every moral confusion, every feeling that things are going off the rails. Jung would say this didn't appear out of nowhere. He believed that the outer world is just a reflection of the inner world. And when humanity's collective soul is fragmented, unconscious, repressed, the world out there starts to shatter too. It's not a coincidence. It's a consequence. Have you noticed how the same wounds appear in different places? How the same fears, the same angers, the same pains repeat themselves in completely different cultures? This happens because there's something deeper connecting us. Jung called this the collective unconscious. An invisible field where we all share memories, traumas, shadows, and archetypes. And when this field is sick, when it's full of repressed contents, of unsaid truths, of unhealed pains, it starts to explode. And the explosion doesn't just happen inside your head, it happens in the streets, in relationships, in institutions, in the way we treat each other. Humanity has a shadow. Just like you have a personal shadow, made of everything you don't want to accept in yourself, humanity also has its own. And this collective shadow is gigantic. It's centuries of denied violence, ignored injustices, buried traumas, fears disguised as courage, hatred masked as morality. And for generations, we've done what we always do with the shadow. We try to hide it. We push it under the rug. We pretend it doesn't exist. We create beautiful stories about who we are, about our values, about our civilization. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It grows. And the more you deny it, the more power it gains. Jung warned that ignoring the shadow is the fastest path to destruction. Because what you refuse to see in yourself, you project onto others. And when an entire civilization refuses to see its shadow, it starts projecting it onto entire groups of people. And then comes war, comes genocide, comes persecution, comes moral collapse. The shattered world you see now is, in large part, humanity's shadow returning. It's saying, you can't ignore me anymore. Can't? Have you ever stopped to think about why so many people are living on autopilot? Why so many people seem disconnected, alienated, unable to feel deeply? Jung would say this is unconsciousness. And unconsciousness isn't just lack of knowledge, it's lack of presence. It's living without questioning, without reflecting, without looking inward. And when consciousness falls asleep, the ego takes total control. And the ego doesn't want truth. It wants power. It wants security. It wants to be right. And to achieve this, it creates division. It separates the world into us and them, into right and wrong, into good and evil. And this separation generates conflict, generates violence, generates destruction. Because the ego doesn't see connection, it only sees threat. And when billions of unconscious egos collide, the world goes to war. Not just physical war, psychological war, spiritual war. War within families, within relationships, within each person. I completely understand when you feel suffocated by this atmosphere, because it's real. And it will only get worse while consciousness continues sleeping. But here's something few people understand. The crisis isn't the enemy. The crisis is the message. Jung saw the great historical collapses not as signs of the end, but as signs of transition. The collective soul enters crisis when it's ready to evolve. When the old systems, the old beliefs, the old ways of living don't work anymore, and then everything starts to crumble. Not because the universe is cruel, but because something new needs to be born. And for something new to be born, the old must die. Have you ever seen a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly? It doesn't simply gain wings, it completely dissolves inside the cocoon. It becomes a kind of biological soup. And only after this total dissolution can the butterfly emerge. Humanity is going through this now. We're in the cocoon. And it's uncomfortable, it's scary. But it's necessary. Because what comes after this dissolution is a completely new form of being. A more integrated consciousness, more awake, more whole. And the suffering. Suffering has a role in all this. I know it seems unfair. I know you wanted easier answers. But Jung understood that suffering doesn't arise by chance. It's the alarm clock of the soul. When everything's comfortable, when everything's working, nobody questions anything. Nobody seeks meaning. Nobody looks inward. But when pain arrives, when crisis explodes, when the ground disappears beneath your feet, you're forced to wake up. You're forced to ask, what's happening here? Why am I feeling this? What needs to change? And these questions are the beginning of awakening. Without crisis, there's no real transformation. Without pain, there's no depth. And this world is going through collective pain because it's ready for a collective awakening. I'm not romanticizing suffering. I'm saying it has a function, and that function is to take you out of sleep. So what do you do with all this? Jung had a clear answer: individuation. This is the central concept of all his work. Individuation is the process of becoming who you really are. Not what they taught you to be, not what society expects from you, but who you are in your deepest essence. And this process requires courage, because it means looking at the parts of yourself you've always avoided. It means integrating your shadow. It means questioning your beliefs. It means descending to the depths of yourself and finding something real there. And when you do this, something extraordinary happens. You stop projecting your pain onto the world. You stop blaming others. You stop living on autopilot. And you start living consciously. And this isn't just an individual change. Jung believed that each person who individuates, each person who wakes up, affects the entire collective unconscious. You heal a piece of the world's soul when you heal your own soul. The world won't heal through mass movements. It will heal through awakened individuals, one by one, doing the inner work that nobody else can do for them. And integrating the shadow isn't an act of self-flagellation. It's not dwelling on your mistakes. It's recognizing that you have destructive potentials inside you, deep fears, stored anger, desires you've never admitted. And instead of denying all this, you look it straight in the face and say, this is also mine. I'm not just light. I also have darkness. And that's okay. Because when you accept your shadow, it stops controlling you. It stops coming out unconsciously, sabotaging your life, destroying your relationships, making you act in ways you don't even recognize. And more importantly, when you integrate your shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop seeing monsters where there are only wounded people. You stop feeding division, and you start creating connection. And this is the only real way to transform the world. Not through beautiful speeches, not through ideologies, but through real transformation of consciousness. One person at a time. And in the middle of all this chaos, something silent is happening. There's a growing number of people waking up. People who are tired of lies, tired of superficiality, tired of living without meaning. And these people are starting to question everything. They're starting to seek something deeper, something more true. Jung would say this is the birth of a new consciousness. It doesn't happen loudly. It doesn't come with fanfare. It comes slowly, in silence, within each individual who decides to stop living asleep. And when you look around with attentive eyes, you see the signs. People seeking spirituality in new ways. People questioning the system. People trying to live more authentically. People realizing that the old way of living doesn't work anymore. This isn't naivety. It's the beginning of something real. Because the old consciousness based on fear, control, and separation is dying. And a new consciousness based on integration, presence, and connection is trying to be born. And you're part of this, because this world can't last forever. Not the way it is. Systems built on unconsciousness are unstable by nature. They can last decades, even centuries, but eventually they collapse. Because they contradict something fundamental in human nature. We weren't made to live separated. We weren't made to live in constant fear. We weren't made to repress who we really are. And when an entire civilization is built on these false foundations, it starts to crack. And the cracks are appearing now. Everywhere. In politics, in the economy, in relationships, in collective mental health. And many people are afraid. And fear is understandable. But fear can also be an invitation to wake up, an invitation to face the truth head on. And the truth is that this collapse isn't the end of the story, it's the transition to the next chapter. And the next chapter depends on what we do now. The true awakening doesn't happen in demonstrations. It doesn't happen on social media. It doesn't happen through political speeches. It happens in silence, inside you, when you decide to stop running from yourself, when you decide to look at your shadow, when you decide to question your deepest beliefs, when you decide to live consciously, even when it's difficult. That's the real awakening. And it's not spectacular. It's intimate. It's solitary. It's deep. And it's the only real path to transformation. Jung knew that external revolutions without inner transformation are just repetitions of the same pattern. You can overthrow a government, you can change laws, you can reorganize society, but if people's consciousness doesn't change, everything goes back to how it was. Because the problem isn't in the structures. The problem is in the unconsciousness that creates these structures. And the only way to change unconsciousness is through inner work. One individual at a time, descending into their own depths and emerging different. And here's something that will surprise you. You're not just healing yourself. You're healing the world. Jung believed that the collective unconscious is like an invisible energy field that connects all human beings. And every time a person wakes up, every time a person integrates their shadow, every time a person chooses consciousness instead of fear, this field changes. It becomes a little clearer, a little lighter, a little healthier. You don't need to save the whole world. You don't need to fix all the problems. You just need to do your inner work. And by doing this, you contribute to collective healing. Because everything is connected. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every choice you make reverberates through the collective unconscious. And when you choose consciousness, you reduce the invisible violence that sustains this shattered world. You're part of the solution. Not because you're special, but because you're human. And every human being who wakes up diminishes the collective darkness. And after the collapse, what comes after? Jung spoke about the reconstruction phase. After the old structure falls, after the illusion dissolves, after the shadow is integrated, something new can be built. But it's not a superficial reconstruction. It's not just raising the same buildings with new names. It's a reconstruction of the soul. New values emerge, new ways of relating, new priorities. People who go through a deep crisis and survive are never the same again. They're born again. And the same happens with civilizations. When a civilization goes through a true collapse and survives, it's reborn different, more mature, more conscious, more integrated. And that's what's happening now. We're in the middle of the collapse, and it's horrible. But on the other side of this collapse exists the possibility of something more whole, something more true, something more human. And this possibility depends on how many people will wake up during this process. So, what does it mean to truly wake up? It means stopping living in survival mode. It means stopping reacting unconsciously to the world's stimuli. It means starting to choose your responses. It means looking inward and asking, who am I without all the layers they taught me to wear? Who am I without fear, without anger, without the need for approval? Waking up isn't reaching perfect enlightenment. Waking up is simply starting to pay attention. Attention to what you feel. Attention to what you think. Attention to the patterns you repeat. Attention to the wounds you carry. And from this attention, you start to change. Not forcefully, but naturally. Because consciousness by itself is already transformative. When you really see something, you can no longer act as if you hadn't seen it. And that's the power of awakening. It takes you out of blindness. And once you see, you can't go back to sleep the same way. I understand if you're feeling fear now. Fear of what's coming. Fear that the world will really go into total collapse. Fear that you won't be able to handle it. But fear is also part of the process. Jung would say that fear is the shadow of courage. And when you look at fear head-on, when you recognize it's there, it loses the power to paralyze you. Because fear only controls you when it's hidden, when it's unconscious, when you don't want to admit it exists. But when you say, yes, I'm afraid, and that's okay, fear transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes clarity. It becomes motivation to act. And the action that conscious fear generates isn't flight, it's confrontation. It's real courage, not the courage that denies fear, but the courage that acts despite fear. And that's the courage this moment requires from you. The old way of living is dying, and you feel it. You feel it in your skin. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your soul. The structures that sustained the lives of previous generations don't work anymore. The jobs that promised security don't exist anymore. The institutions that promised protection are failing. The ideologies that promised meaning are empty. And in the middle of this emptiness, you're being called to find something new. Not something someone will hand you. Something you need to build within yourself. And that's the hardest work there is. Because it's much easier to follow a manual. It's much easier to obey an authority. It's much easier to believe in external promises. But the truth is that nobody's going to save you. No leader, no movement, no ideology. Salvation, if it exists, is in your own awakening, in your own individuation, in your own courage to live consciously. And maybe this is the hardest truth of all. You're alone in this process. But you're not abandoned. Because while you descend into your depths, there are millions of other people doing the same. Each at their own pace, each with their own wounds, each with their own shadow. And together, even without knowing each other, you're changing the collective unconscious. You're planting seeds of a new consciousness. You're opening the way for those who will come after. And that's not small. That's everything. Because real transformation always begins at the margins. Always begins with those who dare to question. Those who dare to feel. Those who dare to wake up. And you, if you're here, if you're hearing this, if something inside you is resonating with these words, you're one of these. And the world needs you awake, not sleeping, not pretending, but truly awake. And when you wake up, something changes in how you see the world suffering. You stop trying to run from it. You stop trying to deny it. You look at it and recognize, yes, there is pain. Yes, there is injustice. Yes, there is darkness. But there's also something moving beneath all this. Something trying to emerge. Something trying to be born. And you can be part of this birth. Not through grand gestures. Not through spectacular heroism, but through your own inner work, through your own healing, through your own transformation. And every small change you make within yourself reverberates in the world. Every shadow you integrate diminishes the collective darkness. Every fear you face reduces the fear in the collective unconscious. Every truth you recognize illuminates a piece of human consciousness. And that's real power, not the power that dominates, but the power that transforms. Jung said that humanity's greatest danger isn't the atomic bomb. It's unconsciousness. Because unconscious people do terrible things without even realizing it. They follow orders. They obey authorities. They repeat destructive patterns. And they do all this believing they're right. Because unconsciousness always thinks it's justified. Always finds an excuse. Always blames someone. But consciousness is different. Consciousness sees. It sees its own shadow. It recognizes its own responsibility. It knows there's no external enemy, that everything begins within. And that's why consciousness is dangerous to systems based on control. Because you can't control someone who's awake. You can't manipulate someone who's attentive. You can't deceive someone who's present. And that's why awakening is revolutionary. Not because it overthrows governments, but because it destroys the psychological foundations that sustain tyranny, oppression, and alienation. And you now have a choice. You can close your eyes again. You can return to the comfort zone. You can pretend you didn't see what you just saw. Many people do this. Because waking up is scary. It's lonely. It's difficult. And nobody's going to applaud you for it. Nobody's going to give you medals. Nobody's going to recognize the invisible work you're doing inside yourself. But you'll know. And that's the only real reward. The intimate certainty that you're living truthfully. That you're no longer sleeping. That you're no longer running. That you're facing life head on, with all its pain, with all its beauty, with all its complexity. And this certainty is more valuable than any external approval. Because it frees you. It frees you from the need to be who others want you to be. It frees you from the fear of being rejected. It frees you from the prison of the ego. And the ego will resist. It will give you 1,000 reasons not to wake up. It will say it's dangerous, that it's useless, that nothing will change anyway, that you're insignificant, that the world is too big to be affected by you. And the ego is afraid because it knows that awakening is its end. Not the end of you, but the end of the false version of you, of the version that was built by fear, by approval, by the need for control. And letting this version die is painful. It's like losing a part of yourself. But it's not you who's dying. It's the mask. And beneath the mask there's someone real, someone alive, someone whole. And that someone is waiting to emerge, waiting for you to have the courage to remove the mask and show your true face. And in the end, it all comes down to this: courage. Courage to look, courage to feel, courage to question, courage to change, courage to live consciously in a world that prefers sleep. Jung knew that few would have this courage. He knew that most would choose unconsciousness because it's easier, because it's safer, because it doesn't require anything. But he also knew there would always be those who would choose the difficult path, those who can't live sleeping, those for whom truth is more important than comfort. And if you've made it this far, if these words have touched something inside you, you're one of these. And the world needs you, needs your consciousness, needs your courage, needs your light. Not to save the world, but to illuminate a piece of it. And when millions of people illuminate their own pieces, the whole world starts to shine. This world can't last forever, not the way it is, because it was built on unconsciousness, and unconsciousness is unsustainable. But the end of this world isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one, and you're here at this exact moment because you have a role in this story. Not a grandiose role, not a hero's role, but an essential role. The role of waking up, of integrating your shadow, of living consciously, of being true. And when you do this, you're not just changing your life, you're changing the collective unconscious. You're contributing to the birth of a new consciousness. And this new consciousness is the only real hope humanity has. Not a naive hope, not a hope that denies pain, but a deep hope. A hope born from lucidity. A hope that knows that after the darkest night, the sun always rises. And you, by waking up, are helping this sun to rise. So wake up. Not tomorrow, not when it's more convenient. Now. Because this moment is all you have. And this moment is asking for your presence. It's asking for your consciousness. It's asking for your courage. And if you answer this call, if you take this step toward awakening, you'll discover something extraordinary. You'll discover that you were never really alone, that there's a greater force sustaining you, that there's a deep meaning in all this, and that waking up isn't losing the world. It's finding it for the first time, for real, without filters, without illusions, without lies. And this real world, with all its pain and all its beauty, is infinitely richer, more alive, more true than any dream you were living before. If this content touched something inside you, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Because awakening doesn't happen alone. It happens when people meet other people who are also waking up. And together, even without knowing it, you're transforming the world. One awakening at a time.